Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Yeah.
Sorry, we are starting a few minutes late, but we were, as usual, not as usual, I say, but as in most webinars, there were a little bit of technical glitches, but we are good to go. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am very pleased to welcome all of you on behalf of the United States Agency for International Development for the second South Asia Energy Series. Today's webinar is being organized and co-hosted by two of USAID's program, namely South Asia Regional Energy Hub, or SAREH, we call it, as well as Greening the Grid, Renewable Integration and Sustainable Energy, or GTG-RISE in short, as we call it. Today's session focuses on a very important topic, as you can figure out from our webinar's topic today. It's enhancing grid flexibility for clean energy transition. As we all know that South Asia, combined South Asia has set a target of 180 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2022. And are looking forward to having renewable energy penetration of 20 to 60% by 2030. So in today's webinar, we will be discussing about the challenges of integrating variable renewable energy and approaches and learning specifically to help South Asia to achieve this, to achieve their targets and goals. So let me just give you a bit of background on the series. South Asia Energy Series is a sort of a platform which we have started under the hub, or to promote more, exchanges and dialogue between the stakeholders to discuss, topics of relevance and importance for the region. It's being organized as a part of USAID's Asia Edge initiative, which stands for basically enhancing growth and development through energy. The initiative focuses on, strengthening energy security and expanding access to sustainable and clean energy across the Indo-Pacific region. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the key mandates of Asia Edge is to support regional energy integration and markets. When we are talking about integration, it's not just about energy infrastructure integration, but also in terms of integrating the region in terms of more fluid flow of information, exchanges of knowledge, learning, experiences between the stakeholders in South Asia. So with this mandate, the South Asia Energy Series has been started by the hub or the SAREH platform to disseminate more and more ideas and experiences and knowledge exchange. At the same time, while the hub mandates, the hub is focusing on promoting knowledge exchanges. In India, we have been working over past 5 years on looking at some of the issues around grid flexibility and solutions to support it. And we thought that maybe this is a good opportunity to present some of the findings with a broader stakeholders. The energy series will include few webinars. So this is just the first one on this particular topic. We plan to have more on this very important topic. And we will dive into different potential solutions on related to grid flexibility. Today's webinar, we will focus on coal flexible operation of coal-based power plant as a potential solution. In future, we will be looking at other topics or themes such as battery energy storage system and so on and so forth. We're really fortunate to have with us great speakers and experts from the region who will not only be sharing their experiences and knowledge with you, but also provide you a lot of context in terms of the region. So with that, we will soon begin. I just wanted to mention that although we were to be joined by Dr. Banda from Ceylon Electricity Board, but he had an unfortunate incident in his family, death of a close family member. So unfortunately, he had to drop off. But we have in his place Mr. Randika Vaijekun. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name properly, Randika. But he has been very gracious to join us at this last moment. And he has plenty of experience to share with us. So our webinar, quickly, just to give you a quick agenda for today. We have Suni sir taking you through the context of this very important theme today. We have presentation on the pilot which we did in India, and then we have sharing of experiences by our colleague from NTPC in India, from Ceylon Electricity Board in Sri Lanka, and another colleague from Bangladesh as well. So before we now start officially, a quick mandatory photo shoot for all of us, just to um, have our images recorded for this event. So can I request everybody to please switch on your cameras? So we'll just quickly take a quick photo. Yes, thank you so much. Rantika, would you please put on your camera? Yes, great. Great. Thank you so much. I still see Kakoli, Baba sir, Tushar. Don't see you, but we'll give you 2 seconds and then we will switch on. Okay, so Bopi, just give me a signal once you're done. Everybody, please give a quick smile, even though it looks odd. But yeah, looking like great. Done? Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's always great to, since we can't be there in person, it's always great to just join and, put on the camera, see each other. Even though it's a virtual platform, hopefully we'll soon be able to do in-person event as well. So few, quick housekeeping rules. We have already started. I think we intend to record this session and also share it. So that's for information of everybody. For all the panel members, we'll request you to please switch off your cameras and be on a mute, even if you don't switch off your camera, but please definitely be on mute when not speaking so that there is no static or disturbance for the other speakers. For the attendees, thank you so much for joining us. We would request you to please put on your comments in the chat box. There's also, you will see there is a question answer window. Please put on your questions there. We have built in some time for the question answers, so we are hoping to take some of them. So with that, I will now move on to introducing our first speaker for the afternoon, who I'm sure needs no introduction, but still, Mr. Suni. Mr. S.K. Suni is presently serving as the advisor to POSOCO. Mr. Suni has more than 4 decades of experience fostering the growth of power system operation and building sustainable institution mechanism. Earlier, he has served at many key positions, including as the CEO of POSOCO, as well as the executive director of PGACL. A well-known personality in the sector as well as in the region, Mr. Suni has vast experience to share with us and a knowledge. So we are really fortunate to have you, sir. Suni sir will be covering the challenges of VRE integration, potential solutions, and the pilots in region and much more. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Manali. I hope I am visible and you can listen to me. Yeah. So thank you, first of all, USAID, GTG-RISE, and South Asian Regional Energy Hub for this series of workshops. I am very happy to be in the first one. Ladies and gentlemen, I have around 15 minutes time. I have to only create the ambience. The rest will be taken by the specialists. So first of all, climate change concerns is a serious concern. The world is grappling with it. We need to move to clean energy, 100% decarbonization. There are declarations after declarations. Everybody is preparing for COP26, Glasgow, and all of us are committed. There have been some setbacks here and there, but by and large, we are on track. So, RE has arrived. Renewable energy, particularly solar, has arrived. It has come here to stay. And coal is on its way out. But it's going to take time. But before I get into the flexibilization of coal, which is the topic today, let me share a few of my thoughts. Number one, some of the things 40 years back or 35 years back we used to discuss, used to appear as an utopia are now reality. First, no shortages in India. Shortages wiped out. There were experts who used to say that in my lifetime, I will not be able to see shortage-free India. But for last 4-5 years, there is no shortage in India. Private generation has surpassed central sector and state sector generation. At what a speed it has crossed. That has happened. All the villages in India have been electrified. National grid has been formed. I very well remember putting up a 2-pager in a conference in Goa in 1980 and was ridiculed that how can you connect the whole grid, you know amount of money which is required and the effort. But today national grid is reality for last 5 years. So what is being thought of would happen, I am very much confident about it. But there are challenges in the process, in the pathways. The first one is that renewable energy is not as tameable as the conventional thermal and hydro. They don't listen to the system operator. And why should they? They are, after all, zero marginal cost. Nobody wants to spill zero cost water, zero cost sunshine or wind. So we have to make others more flexible to accommodate renewable. And it is not the first time that we are doing it. When the nuclear stations came, they were also equally rigid, and pump storage did the countering job, and it's basically a renaissance of that. There have been studies and studies in the last 5 years. As Monali mentioned, I don't think nowadays even one day you will get a free day where there is no new report or not a new workshop or a webinar on this topic. Columns of knowledge has been created, and all of us know about most of the things. But when it comes to implementation, there are issues. First of all, what is flexibility? It's extremely difficult to define flexibility. Then we have to measure it, have metrics for it, pay for it, incentivize it. All these things require time, and it has to sync. And as Monali mentioned in the initial stages, it's not only a technical problem, it's a regulatory problem, it's a policy problem. There are issues of market design. I'll come to that one by one. So what are the signs of inflexibility? If you are not able to balance your load generation, you are inflexible. If there is a large area control error, there is an inflexibility. If you are curtailing RE, then that shows that you are inflexible. If the price in the market goes to negative, it's a clear sign that there is a inflexibility in the system. So we need to understand the nuances of each of these, flexibility or inflexibility, in the entire continuum and the entire spectrum. The second aspect is that technically, commercially, it's all may be possible. But economics of flexibility, economics of flexibility is extremely important, is also well established. So let's start one by one. There is a basket of suggestions and actions which have to be taken. And if I were to pick up the first one, it has to be network, expansion of grid, interconnect. That's the least regret solution to make the grid more flexible. You can harness diversity of all kinds. You can take care of uncertainties, and there is a big list why we should interconnect. And with this clean energy and renewable, all what we can do is hasten the grid interconnection. India and our Honorable Prime Minister has already talked about OSOWOG. We are all working towards that. And then comes market. A lot of work has been done in markets in the last 4 or 5 years. Day-ahead market was fully stabilized. A real-time market has come, and now maybe derivatives and financial products will come in. Ancillary, market-based ancillary services is also being thought of, and there would be many more products besides bilateral, over-the-counter, and other things. Through USAID and GTG-RISE, there have been many pilot projects, including AGC. AGC has come for the first time in India after so many decades of operation. Hydro plants are being tried with this. Even solar plant also, there is an attempt to put them on AGC when we will have very large 100 gigawatt of solar. There have been huge number of joint publications. It's a pleasure to work on all of these. Policymakers and regulators are live to these issues. If you have any difficulty as an operator or as a player, you need to approach your policymakers and regulators, and I have seen that it's never wanting. They are ready to help. We need to build institutions, new players. Like in India, we have now SECI. In India, we will very soon have DSO, distribution system operator. So the variety of institutions have to be built for this new normal or with more renewable energy. The flexibility, even if it is there, it's very difficult to extract it conveniently. What is extractable flexibility? Theoretically, something is there, practically it is realizable, but how do you extract? And contracts, sometimes they can be a big hindrance. We got to introduce flexibility in contracts. And as I was talking about transmission as the numero uno solution for introducing flexibility, cross-border is at the top of the agenda. Now we have policies loud and clear on cross-border, and even regulations have come out. We are really looking forward to Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, even Myanmar participating in exchange. There are reports by POSOCO, dozens of them, Forum of Regulators, Forum of Load Dispatchers, CEA, CRC, GIZ, IGF, USAID, in association with NREL. So many reports are there. And all the knowledge is being compiled for the benefit of the whole region. Some other low-hanging fruits, like demand response, we must be live to this. Now that we have adequacy, when it comes to capacity expansion, demand response has to be kept in mind. It's the cheapest. Wherever the capacity auctions have taken place, megawatts are found to be the cheapest. There are some work going on this direction also. While making flexible transmission, again and again I repeat, we have number of HVDCs, more than a dozen HVDC in the world. This area has highest number of HVDCs. But we have to also make our other sources flexible, like say hydro. How do we bring in storage? How do we take care of pump storage? How do we encourage that? Battery storage, where it should be, siting and sizing of that. And of course, now hydrogen, you cannot complete any webinar without hydrogen, having heard it 2 days back. Sector coupling. We are talking about electricity, but unless we talk about coal, gas, electrification of cooking, induction heating, e-mobility, the entire canvas will not be complete. We have to think of how we can bring in more economy, more flexibility in gas pipelines, in coal transportation, and use the moving loads inside vehicles, the batteries, properly. But ladies and gentlemen, this region, particularly India, still we have any time more than 100 to 120 gigawatts of thermal on bar. We cannot afford to ignore it. Even if we want it to be phased out, it has a long inertia. Billions and billions have been invested, and it has to be further tamed, made more flexible. And I don't know how many decades it will take for thermal to be phased out fully. And if we have to live with it, we need to morph ourselves, bring in more flexibility in thermal. And I think that's what will be talked about by the specialist in this event. Some of the things like 9 p.m. 9-minute event. The world has watched that how within 9 minutes 30 gigawatt plus goes off and comes back, and how as a perfect symphony the Indian system demonstrated its flexibility, solidarity, and whatnot. But this is not an overnight thing which could have happened. All the efforts which have been made for decades in terms of grid code, standardization, systems, processes, settlement system, market design, and institutions, all these things came to our rescue during 9 p.m. 9-minute event. But the fact remains that all the future researchers, policymakers, and regulators, if they have to look at flexibility, they have to study this event in great detail. Now, coming to almost close, I have taken a lot of time. Everything is important. Nothing can be lost sight of. Be it network, policy, regulations, market, cross-border, demand response, hydro flexibility, thermal flexibility, pump storage, battery also, we should be absolutely live to it, so that by the time the prices fall, it becomes more affordable. We should be ready to welcome battery at every level. It will also be a game changer, that there is no doubt about it. But the issue before us is, how do we do sequencing? How do we do phasing? Which one we should devote maximum time and energy, which we have limited? How do we ensure that we make mistakes, but less costly mistakes? How do we take decisions which are least regret decisions? How do we prioritize our actions? And that's where thermal flexibilization is almost at the top, besides grid integration. Of course, I will never miss saying that the expansion of grid is beautiful solution. It serves so many purposes, and I'm looking forward to synchronous operation with Bangladesh. But thermal flexibilization is also a detailed subject. How do we go to minimum turndown level? What kind of a ramping we should have? How much is the startup cost? How much time it takes to start a unit? Up to how many hours it can remain at technical minimum? Each is a very complex technical subject, as well as commercial issues, regulatory issues, changes of practices, all have to be gone into the detail of it. Because when it comes to implementation, The envelope statements don't work. We have to get into the real depth, and that's where a lot of work has been done by USAID and GTG, even GIZ. All of them have worked on this, and today almost all the plants of interstate generating stations very willingly go up to 55%. I hope that very soon this 55 will become 45. We quickly need it because demand is changing, and we need to, while track renewables, we also need to track the changing shape of demand, particularly post-COVID. Our behavior is changing. The entire load curve is shifting towards right. How much it will shift? What will be the new growth? What will be the new load factor? What will be the new shape? And how do we accommodate all these VREs and incorporate all this flexibility with the largest thermal fleet is the challenge. With this, I am looking forward to the subsequent specialist speaking, and assure my colleagues in the neighboring countries that there is nothing to be afraid of this. We have to find our solutions, and we can do it. There is enough of knowledge, experience, and confidence available. But we need to plunge into it and learn from each other. Small systems, let me tell you, you should not feel that India is a very large and small systems. I have operated myself small systems in 80s. It is extremely difficult to operate a small system. It's not very easy. So best is all of us should cooperate towards decarbonization and make use of all the knowledge column which has been created by institutions like GTG and SAREH and USAID. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Suni sir, for setting an excellent context for not only this, but the entire series, which we are hoping to. As you very rightly pointed out, there are so many solutions and combinations which can be taken up, markets, cross-border power trade, and the different technologies which we'll be talking about. So thank you so much once again. And in interest of time, I will quickly invite our next speaker, the presenter, Anuj Vashishta, who will be presenting the findings and the learnings from the pilot which we did in India in partnership with NTPC as well as with Gujarat State Electricity Corporation. So Anuj, quickly introducing Anuj. Anuj is an energy sector consultant with 15 years of experience. He has also worked in not only in India, but Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, and also has the direct experiences of working in coal-based power plant. He has several other, experiences, but I'm not repeating it here. But I'll quickly hand it over to you. Anuj, please take it over. Yeah, the presentation is also up. So Anuj, you're on mute, Anuj. Anuj, you're on mute, and I'll suggest that you switch off your camera because we see that network. Anuj, we cannot hear you. Yes, now we can.
Okay.
Don't switch on the camera.
Once again, the contact so apt for the discussions to follow in the next 1 hour. So the genesis of this pilot that we did with was laid way back in 2016 when Renewable Energy Laboratory US and POSOCO collaborated program with support from USAID. And what came out as one of the very emphasizing recommendations in the study was that RE grid integration is definitely possible with large coal-based units getting flexed from the existing 60 or 70% of operational loads to 40%. That would essentially result in reducing the curtailment of RE by a significant amount. And that's precisely the premise where we started off way back in 2017 on this particular pilot. So once again, good afternoon all to the audience who have joined. What we will do in the next discuss in the next 15 minutes would be to take you on just to give you a snapshot on the GTG-RISE coal flexibility pilot. We will look at some of the key learnings that we had over the past 3 or 4 years. 15 minutes is too short a time to disseminate all the learnings that we had, but we will try to summarize that within the frame. We'll also look at the regional relevance of flexible operations in a couple of slides. We have eminent speakers from the regions, so we'll not deliberate much on this, but with the limited experience that we have, we will try to discuss on that particular topic. And the next steps would essentially be to look at what measures and learnings can be disseminated from the Indian subcontinent to these regions, especially in the coal flexibility aspect, which has been making strides over the past 4 or 5 years in India. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we started way back in 2017. This is a 4-year-long journey that we had while working with NTPC, one of the largest public utilities and power generation utilities in India, and one of the state utilities in Gujarat, which happens to be a western coast of India. We started with identifying the way flexible operations at a couple of 200 and 500 megawatt units in each of these utilities. So we looked at identifying how these units have run over the past 10 years, what has been the operational practices, how have been the maintenance schedules that are carried out, what have been the major overhauls. And this also demonstrated us a very new experience of very good learning on how the units are run. Where have tried and tested for the last so many years. Having done the feasibility studies, we also try to identify the cost that would be attributable to flexible operations should these units be subjected to cyclic operations or to shifting in the near future. And I'm very glad to reiterate and to emphasize that we were joined by a series of eminent experts from Intertech. It's a US-based specialist organization who has done a lot of studies on these aspects. And equally supported by Mr. Anjan Kumar Sinha. He is an ex-NTPC operational expert, and his experience in operations of coal-based power plants came very handy in conducting these studies. So once we did the feasibility studies, then stage 2 was to look at what cost would be attributable. We try to identify and map out the incremental cost that would be applicable for units will be subjected to flexible generation, and essentially also looked at how these units can be compensated in regulatory terms. So be it in terms of the capex that the unit would incur for a one-time retrofit, or in terms of the operational expenses, be it due to the degradation in the heat rate, or due to increased startup fuel oil consumption, or due to decrease in the efficiency due to part load efficiencies, part load operations. So those kind of costing details were also made. Now, once we had identified and measured the damages that would be inflicted, the cost that would be attributable to those damages, it was time to look at whether our pilots would actually demonstrate a scale up for the 500 megawatt units for these utilities. And that essentially resulted in us preparing, a fleet-wide, or recommending a fleet-wide strategy for NTPC as well as Gujarat. And why it was essential to prepare was that since, let's say, if I take an example of NTPC, there were a host of, let's say, 200 to 220 units of subcritical 200 and 500 megawatts. And it is imperative to know that not all units will be subject to flexibilization. And it is therefore equally prudent to know that which unit should be selected first, and which unit should be, based on techno-economic clearances, dispatch, merit order dispatch, the past history, the aging of the unit, the coal quality that it receives, and so on and so forth. So that's where we presented it to the respective utilities. And then, of course, we looked at how to scale it up in terms of reaching out to other utilities. So we, in the final year, we in fact reached out to one of the other state utilities and have been supporting them on similar initiatives. So in a nutshell, a lot many activities that went through entire years. Saying a lot many knowledge dissemination workshops and webinars were conducted, and lot many reports have been presented and in fact released in public domain. As we go forward, I will introduce you to some of these which you can be easily accessible in public domain. Next slide, please. So talking about some of the key takeaways, we have summarized only a few of them, but there are a host of other learnings and recommendations that came out. But certainly some of the key ones is one of the very key learnings was on the operational practices and the procedures. The way the units have been, coal-based units have been run over past, let's say 20 years or 25 years of their useful life, that actually determined how challenging it was for us to convince the plant operators to run it on a cyclic mode. And that essentially also led us to prepare low-load test run procedures to instill confidence in the operators and to demonstrate them that yes, the units can run at low loads without any significant retrofits or CapEx investments. What we did was essentially during the feasibility stage, we looked at, we took their 10-year data, operational data, water chemistry data, and how the boiler tube leak, or what have been the major or replacements and major capex investments that have occurred, and that essentially helped us to carve out certain recommendations on the operational procedures, that whether let's say the machine on an auto mode and manual mode has already given those provisions for operators, whether bypass valves should be used, whether the flame stability can be managed through burner tilt mechanisms or advanced flame adjustment mechanisms, how should the coal mills be run on an optimum load so as to ensure flame stability. Those kind of recommendations came out, and the way the unit was operated over the last 20 years saw a significant change in terms of the revised operational procedures that were put as a guidance document to these utilities. The second and more important aspect was on benchmarking and prioritization. And why I say this is, again, coming to the fact that while 200 and 500 megawatt units that we looked at for NTPC and GACCL were a pilot, we also tried to demonstrate that how going forward, when more number of units will be subjected to flexible operations, which units should actually be looked at right from day one. So if I talk about numbers, the Central Electricity Authority, the nodal agency in India, it has forecasted a scenario for, let's say, July 2022, a worst case scenario where if 160 gigawatt of solar penetrate in the grid, and we have close to 82 gigawatts of conventional coal-based capacity ramping down single day, and the rate at which it is going to ramp up and ramp down is close to 300 to 310 megawatts per minute. Now, for those who know about this field or who are conversant with these technical jargons, it essentially is very difficult to bring down such large capacities at such rates and to actually ramp up again at such rates in the evening. So this essentially requires, and this also requires that which units would actually come down out of, let's say, 230 gigawatts of coal-based capacity that we have presently. 82 gigawatts would combine which units? Not all units are required to be flexibilized. Some units would require retrofit investments. Some units would be able to, churn out, would be able to do the cyclic operations without any retrofits, just changes of operational procedures. So those all prioritization, classification of units and benchmarking becomes really important. And that's what we did on a pan-India level. And we came out with specific units which could be looked at based on merit order and other techno-economic criteria. Next slide, please. Now, once having done that, it was equally important to to instill confidence among the operators. We had a lot of learnings globally that US is able to run units at 20% of their technical minimum without any major retrofits, and we had to showcase those demonstrations, those examples in India. And for that, we essentially we did pilot test runs at a couple of units in NTPC and as well as in Gujarat. And I'm glad that we were successful in getting those units which were actually running at 60 to 70% earlier throughout their life so far. We were bring them down to 40% on sustainable, sustained load operating conditions without any secondary fuel oil support and without any significant retrofits. And this was certainly a game changer because it instills a lot of confidence in the operators who are actually running those units, because they know then how the unit is going to respond in the near future if I am going to press this button. So this also helped us to carve out the low load test run procedures. This has been publicly released for wider dissemination. You can easily download it from the link that has been provided on this slide. The next important aspect, and which I think Suni sir also mentioned, that it is not technical. It is not only technical. It is regulatory also. It is commercial also. And this essentially made us to think that what all damages that the flexible operations would inflict, the cyclic operations would entail, the additional O&M expenses that the unit would cover. There has to be some incentive, some mechanism for compensation to those generators. And we, with the help of, with the support of NTPC and GSECL, we were able to present the incremental cost that we arrived at for both for CAPEX as well as for OPEX to the respective regulatory commissions. Those are still being discussed by the respective regulators. But having said that, I would like to mention here that in India, the compensation for flexible operations still 50% exists through the IEGC 4th Amendment regulation, the Indian Electricity Grid Code regulations. And what we are looking forward is to have have similar compensation mechanisms being laid out for 40% technical minimum operations. We are also looking at state regulators adopting this on a case-to-case basis for compensating the generating utilities for flexible operations. Next slide. One of the most and not just to instill confidence in the operators, it's entirely the effort of the spectrum of stakeholders that is looking at flexible operations of coal-based units in India. So when I say this, I essentially mean is that it's not just the power plants or the coal-based generating units that are equally geared to take up flexible operations at a large scale. It is the policymakers, it is the ministry, it is the central agencies like CEA, POSOCO. It is in fact the transmission utility, which is ensuring that large RE capacity additions get absorbed in the grid. And it is equally important for the OEMs also, to provide those knowledge bases. So from our end, the learnings that we had within these pilots, we demonstrated it through various workshops, through various webinars. We continue to do so. This is one of the ways we have been doing it over the last 1 year. And in terms of scalability, as I mentioned, close to 82 gigawatts is something that we are looking at. Those numbers are significantly high. There is a potential area of improvement in development initiatives, and poses a lot of opportunity for all these stakeholders to contribute in this meeting this requirement. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is what I was mentioning, some of the reports that were publicly released in the events that we conducted last year. These reports are the low load test run procedures are something which were prepared for wider outreach. So any utility willing to conduct low load test can, for those utilities, it will come in very handy. There is a summary report on this pilot which talks about the entire journey, what have been the key recommendations. That again is readily available. This is one of the interesting recipe books for flexibilization of coal-based power plants. This is authored by Mr. Anjan Kumar Sinha. It's a very comprehensive book on whosoever who is in this sector wants to read. Has a lot of technical stuff, interesting technical stuff, for utilities, for regulators, for stakeholders, policymakers to look at. And these are available in public domain. You can easily download, and you can also reach out to us in case if you require any further inputs on these aspects. Next slide, please.
Anuj, can I to wrap up?
Yes. So I will not skip. I will try. I will simply go through these slides. These are some of the experiences that our implementing partners have shared. These are kind words, and also they are actually emphasizing on the fact of flexible operations. Yeah, next slide. Coming to the regional relevance of flexible operations, very limited perspective that is being put out right here, but I think there are eminent experts who would talk about this in greater detail. So if I look at Bangladesh, a lot of it is gas-based capacity, close to 50% is contributed by gas-based capacity, but it has the country has ambitious plans to install RE capacities, and integration of this would certainly require flexible operations of its gas-based plants. We all know gas-based plants are flexible in nature by virtue of their adaptability, but yes, it would be equal to look at the aging of units, the kind of the availability of gas, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Looking at Sri Lanka, similar nature, but here it is mostly dominated by hydro projects, which again are flexible in nature, and it has only one coal plant of 900 megawatts. But more importantly, to look at mini hydro and non-hydro, these are resources which would actually present variability and intermittency in the grid. And also, what we found was that the evening peak of Sri Lanka, that would actually be overshadowed by the morning peak in the coming years because of economic growth. So the peak variations, peak and off-peak variations, would require flexible sources of generation for maintaining grid stability. I think that sums up the overall presentation that we had. I think the next steps would be to look at experience sharing and learnings on a greater detail. This was a very short synopsis of what we did in the pilots, but we would be keen to disseminate more on the technical, policy, and regulatory and commercial aspects in the near future. And regional sharing would be interesting, considering the fact that India coal plants have already started gearing up in a large scale on flexible operations. So thank you so much for the patient listening. Over to you, Monali.
Thank you, Anuj. That's a really good presentation. I'm sorry we have to ask you to rush a bit, but for all the audience, Anuj is easily contactable, and all the speakers, including Suni sir, I'm sure would be glad to respond back to your queries if it's of interest to delve deeper into any of these whatever our presenters are speaking about. So we'll move on to the next speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Banerjee. So NTPC, Mr. Banerjee is presently serving as the General Manager at Operations Service Corporation Corporate Center at NTPC. He has been associated with NTPC for more than 3 decades now. He brings vast experience in operation and maintenance on coal-based thermal units, and he's also leading the work in terms of flexibilization of the coal fleets at NTPC. He's a certified energy audit and a trained assessor. And I'm really delighted to welcome you, Banerjee sir. It would be, again, Mr. Banerjee will take us through a presentation. So I'm passing on to you with a request, sir, that to conclude in 15 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah. Thank you, madam. Whether the slide is visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Thank you, madam. The right perspective is already set for this particular webinar, and Soni Saab had given a larger picture and how flexibility should be, but on the top of it, he had mentioned the importance of coal flexibility or thermal flexibility, and with that, Anuj had covered to some extent the flexibilizations pilot, whatever they had taken in different projects in NTPC and Gujarat State Electricity. So with these, my presentations will be more on the challenges part and how the coal-based stations are facing challenges and how we can mitigate those challenges. So if we start our presentations with the CEA, Central Electricity Authority India report, and where they had mentioned the probable load curve in the year 2022 with the additions of renewables to the tune of 175,000 megawatt. And with that scenario, maybe in the month of July, August, it will reach such a situations when a lot of flexibility of coal-based stations are required, because in India we do not have sufficient gas or hydel capacity as such. So we have to match the integrations of solar and other renewable products with the coal flexibility. And as a result, the higher ramping rate of coal-based plant, minimum loading operations, and frequent startup and shutdown may be required to cope with this type of integrations. And that particular report had also mentioned that with the available capacity of coal-based units, maybe the larger size units, supercritical units, to be run on base load or minimum affecting minimum of them. But the maximum flexibility will be done with the 500 megawatt or 200 megawatt units. That means in medium size units, where the maximum flexibility can be resorted to, and the lower type of units that can be resorted to 2 shift operations or minimum maximum shutdown and startup and that type of operations that they are recommended. And based on that, I am just giving you the scenario, the current, and which has been projected as 2022 scenario. That scenario is not yet reached, but already that is a picture given on the demand curve, when we have seen that that particular demand have 2 peaks. One is the morning peak and another is evening peak, and morning peak is much higher, and which is unlike other years, and where the evening peak normally is higher. But in this particular type of season, the agricultural load is on higher side, and that at peak, that morning peak is much high. And in the bottom of it, the curves shown the load and the RE curve. That means in the daytime, how RE is taking the shape. What is intended to be maybe 1 or 2 years from now, or maybe 3 years from now, and that had not taken so much of serious right now, maybe 40,000 megawatt at the peak at 11 o'clock, 11:30, and when the coal generation reached the bottom. And in the evening, of course, in the morning and evening, coal generation is picking up to meet that morning and evening peak. Now, if we just conclude some of the aspects, what we are observing, that there are the morning and the day and peak and off-peak ratio is coming around 1.45. Hourly ramp rate already is achieving 11 gigawatt per hour, and in 22 the CA report had anticipated the the ramp is 15 gigawatt per hour. So thanks to the regulations set by CRC, where 1% ramping is mandatory, and already we are in the process of achieving that targeted figures of 15 gigawatt per hour, and we are considerably moving ahead in that. So this is the present scenario. I'm just giving you the present context. And now, with respect to coal-based units, of course, these are the three vital areas where we are really focusing on. One is minimum loading operations, another is frequent startup, and third one is the ramp rate. So these are the three basic characteristics of flexibilizations in a coal-based unit. So as NTPC have taken the initiative of having so much of pilot studies, and now we are in the process of implementing it. The learning from all those pilot studies are being under implementations or under process of implementations. And if we see in each of the pilot studies, we have attacked the 500 megawatt units. There are some logic why we are touching. And of course, USAID also associated with the pilot studies of BHL and USAID at Mauda Unit 2, 500 megawatt. And there are other studies as well. At the same time, we have a benchmarking studies to understand the nitty-gritty of the challenges, what the different dimensions of operation and maintenance of a particular plant can face, with the support of EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute. That is also a lot of learning from those. So these are the background from which we have already started our journey in the process of flexibilizations. So these are some of the pictorial views where we are really facing challenges of the flame stability. When we come to the context of minimum loading operations, the most important aspects which come to an operator's mind, whether the flame will be stable under that minimum loading operations. So that is the maximum challenges posed. Similarly, when the units are running at lower load, the chances of flow is getting reduced. As a result, boiler tube is subjected to more heating and overheating and lead to tube failure. Similarly, at part load, there may be the possibility of ash depositions. The coal is a major issue, the variations of coal quality, which is inherent to Indian context. And of course, the advanced process, if we can evolve that process into our systems, then the much better control and better flexibility can be achieved. At the same time, the units which are designed basically with respect to base load operations, so the boiler tubes, etc., are designed with the thick walled components which are subjected to more thermal fatigue. So these are some of the challenges, not exhaustive, just some of the important challenges. So while taking all those pilot studies, some of the basic observations, what we have observed during that pilot studies are the excessive fluctuations of steam temperatures, the steam, main steam and H steam temperature violations, the drum level swings, the flame disturbance during ramping, the occasional furnace pressurizations, not always, but there may be chances of furnace pressurizations, the stalling of PA fans, primary air fans at low load operations, low flue gas temperatures leads to acid corrosions of boiler ducts, and similarly the ramps, what we are giving the rates, that ramp may not be achievable in real sense because of some delayed action, some gaps or some inertia in the system. So all are the basic observations, and based on those observations, we are moving towards the more detail of the observations one by one. So if we see the main steam and HRH steam temperature fluctuations, what we have observed that there is a fluctuation to the tune of 20 to 30 degrees centigrades with respect to our rated parameters. So now how to mitigate that? If the temperature variations are more, the equipments are subjected to more creep and fatigue loading. So that is not intended. That will eat away the basic life components of the equipment. So we have to minimize these temperature variations. That is the basic fundamentals of any flexibilizations projects. So we can do it with respect to introducing advanced process into the system, the process which are anticipatory type, which is proactive. The controls are proactive instead of reactive natures. Normally the control mechanisms are reactive in nature. Based on the observations, they are doing it. But now we have to move towards some advanced process where the intelligence aspects will be associated with the process. So that is what smart temperature controllers are to be introduced. And similarly, the metal temperatures, as we keep on reducing load or keep on moving our ramp rates faster, then there may be a chances of temperature crossing the limits. So if the temperature crossing the particular limits, metallurgical limits, then it leads to failure if it is sustained over a period of time. So that temperature control is to be there. So again, the controllers plays a crucial role. The flame scanners, when the units are running, say, at full load with 6 mils, the elevations of different flame scanners are stacked like that on the left-hand side. But when we come down to 3 mil operations, for example, at 40% minimum load, so stack of flame stackings had reduced. Variations of coal quality, any variations of our flame stability, instability can occur at part load. So there are multiple solutions for that, and that can be introduced while introducing this minimum loading. Similarly, drum level fluctuations, it is also a very predominant phenomenon, and we have observed in all our pilots. And maybe some of the solutions, easy solutions like recirculation valves replaced with the modulating type will help it out. So there are, we have introduced, we are projecting some of our observations and challenges. At the same time, we are prescribing the interventions which may be required to introduce to control these variations. Now, similarly, the steaming in economizer, that is another factors that have to be controlled. So in this particular case, additional HP heaters or tuning of loops with respect to modified sliding pressure can help it out. So this is another solutions related to that. The low primary air flow can lead to stalling of fans at a lower flow. The fan can stall, it can damage the equipments. As a result, the automated startup and shutdown of fans are to be introduced as a solutions for that. When we come down at a lower load, the one fan should cut off, and the single fan should take the entire load. That can help it out. So in a nutshell, these are some of the observations, the critical observations, and associated with that, some of the interventions. Now, identifications of unit for flexibilizations. Yes, 500 megawatt units in all of our pilot studies we have taken into considerations. The capacity 500 megawatt is not important. The important is how the units are enabled with the better automations, better control systems, whether units are enabled with a coordinated master control, whether the chemistry controls with the condensate polishing units are there or not, and the cost associated with the flexibilizations does not depending upon the capacity of the unit. So if we can introduce it at a higher capacity with the 500 megawatt instead of a 200 megawatt units, we can accommodate more RE into the with that flexibilizations. So these are some of the criteria for which we are targeting 500 megawatt to start with. And during the process of flexibilizations, the implementations phase are to be in 2 phases. The first phase, we have to introduce the low-hanging fruits like control systems upgrade, some milling system automations, the BFP recirculation valves replacement. So all those low-hanging fruits, we can introduce flexibilizations, but if we have to sustain over a period of time, say 10 years, 15 years down the line, then we have to think for some retrofit depending upon the intensity of flexibilizations the particular units are subjected to. So based on that, we can go in for a replacement of headers or reheated tubes or turbine control valves or modules in a longer time perspective. So if we see in totality, then we can we can see that to start with, we can have a sort of training and blending of coals. That can be the initiation of the process. Then we can introduce some control instrumentation system upgrades. That is the second phase. Then finally, we can go in for the fleet monitoring and maintenance practices change and some digitalizations introduced into the system. And lastly, we can think for the technological intervention. So as we move towards the right, the cost of flexibilization, the capital component of flexibilization will be much higher. So to start with, we can start with a modest beginning with a much lesser cost implications. But as we move on, then we may have larger capital cost in the long run. So if we see the cost of cycling, there are two basic elements, the capex and operational expenditures. The capex expenditures may vary. It may vary depending upon the type of technology, depending upon the type of coal it is burning. So there are multiple solutions, but based on the pilot studies or the studies carried out, we have to take into considerations these apex. And of course, the operational expenditures are also associated, which is startup cost and heat rate degradations, the enhanced forced outages impact, and additional wind costs. So if we see the different mode of flexibilizations, so as we move towards right, the increasing trend of and increasing trend of cost is associated. So
can I request everybody to please put themselves on mute? Please go ahead.
Thank you. So these slides again, we are quoting the CA recommendations, where it is shown that what may be the different components of compensations at different loading factors, and at the same time it is mentioned that what may be the capex associated per unit cost. So capex based on different pilot studies, the cost is varying from say 20 crores to 50 crores, and which is on a longer term perspective, maybe in a 10 years time frame, the cost is not very much high with respect to per unit cost. It may be 4 to 5 paisa per unit cost of loading, and with respect to operational, of course, a 40% minimum loading operations can have the implications of 26 to 34 paisa based on capacity. Say if it is 200 megawatt, it is 26 paisa. It may be for 500 megawatt, it is 34 paisa. That type of OPEX will be required as per the report of CA, and it is our finding as well. So now on the part of implementations, we have two units which we are implementing these flexibilizations, and in Dadri unit 6 500 megawatt, we are implementing it, and some of the solutions which are control and instrumentation solutions, the solutions of first phase solutions where the cost implications is not very much high, where these BFP recirculation valves and some software related to condition monitoring equipments, automations of fan, pumps, and milling systems that are being introduced. And another units in Simadri, we are introducing the temperature optimizations, the unit load response optimizations, combustion optimizations. So these are the two units where we are implementing, and based on the experience gained with these implementations, we'll go in for a larger perspective with respect to implementations, maybe large-scale implementations of flexibilizations in our different coal-based units. Thank you so much, and any questions I can ready to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee. What we'll do is have the questions at the end, so that we are able to get through the other presentation as well. But this was extremely informative, your hands-on experience. I'm sure many of the stakeholders and participants who are attending must have found it useful. And as mentioned earlier, Mr. Banerjee is available if anybody has more, would like to go into more detail. Please get in touch with the organizers and we will put you in touch with him. With that, we'll now move on to our presenter from Sri Lanka, Mr. Randika Vijayakun from the Ceylon Electricity Board. Randika has been working at the Transmission and Generation Planning Branch of Ceylon Electricity Board, Sri Lanka since 2012. Randika is engaged in preparation of long-term generation expansion plan, as well as conducting several renewable energy integration studies. So he has plenty of experience, as well as has undertaken studies on evaluating natural gas, coal, nuclear, and pump storage, hydro technology, and just the right speaker for us today. So I will pass on or hand it over to Randika. Request Randika if you can take on, and can I ask? Yeah, the presentation is up. Great. Over to you, Randika. Randika, we can't hear you. Are you on? Randika, we're not able to hear you. During the trial, we were able to hear you, but right now we are currently having some trouble.
He tested okay. He tested okay well.
Could we request, if you're using a handset, try without the handset and see if it's helping? Still not able to hear you, Randika. Pramod, can I suggest that if you can get a call with Randika and...
Yeah, sure. I'll speak to him. In the meantime, we can invite Dr. Alam to speak.
Exactly. That's what I was also planning to do. While we apologies to all the participants, while we sort out the technical glitch and resolve the issue of the microphone at Randika's end, what we will do is invite a speaker from Bangladesh, who has also very graciously agreed to join us. Mr. Alam Mondol, he is the national coordinator for two of USAID's programs in Bangladesh called SURE and NREL. We thought, it would be great to have also some bit of perspective on Bangladesh, what's happening in Bangladesh. Mr. Mondal, we wanted to, I'll pose a question and it would be great if you could respond to it. We know that Bangladesh energy demand, most of the energy demand, or let's say significant portion of the demand is met through gas-based capacity. However, the government of Bangladesh has been moving, there's a strong focus on renewable energy in the country. So I wanted to pick your brains on, what do you think, what are the challenges that the country could possibly face, and what do you think, in your opinions, are the enablers or the right enablers to ensure that there is a smooth integration of renewable energy in Bangladesh? So over to you, Dr. Mandal.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is a great question. And the confusion started with your question, like my opinion, I should say in the beginning. So you said government is targeting like accelerated integration of renewables technology. I will come up later. So I had a chance yesterday to attend a webinars scaling up clean energy investments organized by UK Bangladesh Friendship Forum, and Principal Secretary of Honorable Prime Minister was present on that webinars, and also British High Commissioners and Chairman of Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authorities. And I see one of the slides Chairman SAREH has presented, like what are the challenges to integrate renewable energy in Bangladesh, actually in the system. So the main challenges he mentioned it in his slides is like scarcity of land, comprehensive renewable energy mapping, variability, limited institutional capacity, and quality assurance of the products and services. And finally, he mentioned it about the investments. So this is the challenges, but the main issue is, my opinion, I should say, big at the first. Even Anjan says about the 15% from renewables by 2041 actually. This is something hidden, is unclear to me. Like 15% target renewable energy is not really is not like on renewable, on resource, like 15% total, and government is targeting like kind of 3,000 only 800 megawatt by 2041, and about 5,000 or 6,000 megawatt imported from neighboring countries is hydro. They are considering, government is considering as part of like total renewables is total like 10%, and government is also considering import 5%. It's total 15%. So government targets by 2041 is about 4,000 megawatt. Is a not big target. I think this is, we are still undermining the potential of renewable energies that exist in Bangladesh. So the main gaps is also that we are saying the scarcity of land. Yes, we know it's a tiny country, a lot of populations, but if we use 0.3% of total Bangladesh lands, unused land, floating solar on grid, like coastal areas and offshore winds, we can install more than 30 gigawatt. But this is the other challenges. My point of view, the main challenges is the commitments from government. Government has did a significant like achievement. Actually, government has significant achievement in the last 10 years, because you see the IPP, private investment was significant. Now it is almost 50%, 45% power generation comes from private sectors, but they are not aligned with the development of renewable energy sector. They are kind of like is not attractive. They are not coming. You see, you know, maybe currently we have only 40 megawatt of power generation capacities grid integrated. This is really, really tiny. It's 0.6% of total installed capacity. Can you imagine? Say about the grid stability, flexibility. I think based on my experience, this tiny part of megawatt is not is harmful for the grid. Any grid can be captured is possible, but we need to know, as we are the subject point is the grid stability. We need to know how much the capacity we have, what is the plan, how much to be connected in the future from renewables. These things are lacking. We exactly don't know the capacity, grid capacity. We don't know the renewable energy zones, where to be fixed, or where can we extract power for renewables or variable renewables. We don't know. If you see the power sector system master plan, there is no plan for grid extension for renewable energies. It's only based on conventional power plants. It's clearly you will see. Even the latest 2030 plans produced by Bangladesh Power Development Board, there is no sign, nothing written in the about renewables. One thing I should say, government has planned to extend the grid type infrastructure aligned with the increased supply expected from the northwest. This mainly to accommodate power imports from India. This is one target. Second target, to the extension to the south, to accommodate new coal power and gas power plants. However, these plans only consider the emphasize conventional capacity, not the integration of renewable projects. And this is the fact that expected solar and wind projects are located far from the national grid normally, because it's just crowded. Only the remote areas like this we can extract renewable. Otherwise, this is actually not possible in the like the central demands. Actually, demand side we cannot. So that the fact that expected solar wind projects are available far away from the grid may result in necessary grid infrastructure. We need actually upgrades and extension in the southern coastal areas, where future renewable energy project development is expected to be centered. So, but we don't have plan. So main issue is the planning, the government commitment on renewables. These are the challenges. And the transition from gas to, even still government has planned transition to coal and other sources. Is renewable energy is tiny, but I hope government will get this point, will work on this. But parallelly, power division like Power Cell is working to investigate the grid stability due to large scale renewable energy integration, but is ongoing process. Something is coming up. I should not say doing nothing, but it's doing a lot of things. Maybe its coordination is gap. We are not clear about the potential. We are not clear about the future of renewables. So I can talk a lot, maybe because I was allowed actually 1 minute. So, but maybe your speaker comes from Sri Lanka. You can continue. Otherwise, come up with your question, other question. Or if you suggest, I can continue with other things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alam. No, it gives us a good perspective. So obviously, Bangladesh seems to be on the early part of the curve when they are moving. And as you mentioned, though there are studies and some efforts, but a lot of emphasis needs to be on the planning and finding out where the resources is and planning to.
Yes. Even also I should add, like the national grid code we have now available, it has clearly mentioned it's like up to 20 megawatt. So distribution system we can use for the power evacuation, but more than 20 megawatt, you have to go use the transmission lines. So when we need the transmission system for power evacuations, we have to go further. And grid expansion is the necessary. The grid capacity expansion is important. So our cases.
Great. And as Mr. Suni was also saying, bigger the grid, it would address a quite number of issues, including some of the challenges which emerges out of, grid integration. So we'll come back to you if we have time, but I would like to now go back to Mr. Randika and see if he's able to connect and if we can hear him. So thank you.
Okay, I'm here. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alam. Randika, can you hear us?
Yes, Monali. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you, Monali. And I'm back after a small technical difficulty. Well, greetings from Sri Lanka to everyone. And I first thank the South Asian Regional Energy Hub, GT8, and GTG for taking this initiative of a series of webinars, and then especially taking this theme for the discussion today. And being a country in the region that is more ambitious about this clean energy transition, Sri Lanka also shares some of these major concerns on power system flexibility and renewable energy integrations, and then we are trying to work on our solutions to address these challenges in the time to come. And in this very brief presentation, I will quickly take you through what are the challenges that we expect, that we perceive, and then also the interventions that we are working on to enhance the flexibility of our system. In this slide, I explained to you that our system is comparatively small system in the region. It is only having a 4.5 gigawatt of installed capacity with a 2.6 gigawatt of peak demand. And one important characteristic of our system is it is an isolated system. It is not connected to anywhere in the region. But one advantage we have is that we have a fairly good mix of resources, as shown in the slide. And then in the next slide, if you can click forward, we can see, if we look to the future, that mix will be even further enhanced with the introduction of natural gas in 2 to 3 years time. And that is again a very good sign, and then in the direction of enhancing the flexibility as a good source of fuel and then the technology. And in the next slide, please. Now, if you are looking at this transition, according to the present plans, the existing plans, these are the level of development we are expecting from the renewable capacities. And within next 10 to 20 years time, significant growth will come from wind and solar capacities according to existing plans. But right now, the policies are much more ambitious, and then the plans that are underway are much more ambitious. And if you can click forward, and next slide, we can see there are much more growth and much more ambitious on developing renewable energy resources, and basically wind and solar will drive the capacity growth in the next 10 years and within next 20 years. And next slide, please. Well, with this kind of development and with this scale of development, as a country, we are expect to move from to higher levels, higher stages of experiences these challenges. And this slide shows a very good classification from International Energy Agency, which shows the categories of systems depending on the severity of challenges they experience. Now, with the kind of development we are expecting here in Sri Lanka, we are expect to move from the phase 2 to the phase 3, end of the phase 3, where we will experience more challenges, that our flexibility challenges will be much more greater in the next 10 years time and beyond. Next slide, please. Well, these flexibility challenges now, they are very well defined now and widely accepted that there is a range of flexibility challenges, and the long-term flexibility challenges that are associated with capacity adequacy and power system reliability and hydrothermal coordination and so on. And there are again short to medium-term flexibility challenges that mainly deals with system operation, and there are short-term, very short-term flexibility challenges that deals with system stability and so on. And I will take you through these our interventions or our understanding of these challenges from our Sri Lankan systems perspective, and I will work through my way from the long-term challenges to short-term challenges in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Right. Starting with the long-term flexibility challenges. Now, for an example, one of the challenges is the severe seasonality or very strong seasonality of wind resources. For an example, this figure shows the wind generation, hourly wind generation expected from the hour capacity that are expected to develop in next 10 years time. Now we can see that wind being a variable and seasonal form of generation, it has a very strong seasonality that will challenge our balancing in the seasonal availability and then also capacity adequacy. And in the next slide. Right. Now coming to the short to medium term flexibility challenges, in the top graph shows how the system would operate in year 2030, from 10 years from now. And in that chart, the black line shows the system demand, and the red dot line, the red dotted line shows the net demand. That is what actually the conventional power plants has to cater, and catering this net load demand is the most challenging part in this system operation, and that is what actually requires much more flexibility in terms of responding to these changes. And the graph to the top, the figure to the top, the lower figure shows how these conventional and unconventional generation takes place in catering this demand. You can see in the 6th day of this 1 week period where the demand is low. Typically, that could be a Sunday. That is a Sunday. When the low demand is there, you can see the red color. The renewable is variable renewables are curtailed or surplus exist because of the operational constraints. In the next slide, please. Right. Now, if you look at these type of surplus or the curtailment requirement, say, in each hour for the next 10 years, we can see this surplus generation or the curtailment level increases to a significant level. And it is very important that the system has the flexibility as well as the proper measures to ensure the supply-demand balance. And this kind of indicates the flexibility limits of the system, and we are now trying to explore more avenues how to minimize the curtailment as well as to increase the flexibility of the conventional generation. In the next slide, please. Right. Now, looking at the avenues to enhance the flexibility in the Sri Lankan system, I will touch on what we are working on the dispatchable generation and storage hydro system and other energy storage systems. And I will not touch on the HVD interconnection and demand response schemes for the moment. And for the moment, we are focused on these top 3 areas in our work. Next slide, please. Right. Now, shows how we expect combined units in the time to come to operate. We observe that the operation will be much more flexible. They will require much more cyclic operations and part load operation and even frequent start and stop cycles. And we can see the number of startups per year increasing gradually in the time to come. Given these trends, we are actually very much concerned on the technical parameters of these units. I mean, we are concerned to ensure that these performance are there by the design itself. That's the best way to proceed than having to retrofit them later, because that will be costly. Therefore, we ensure that these flexibility parameters are very well captured in the design stage itself. And moreover, we are also concerned on how to unlock the flexibility from the contractual terms and so on, by enabling simple to open cycle operation, as well as to not to limit the flexible operation due to fuel supply agreements and so on. The next, please. Right. This slide shows how we expect our baseload units to perform a flexible operation in the time to come. In the two charts shows the operation of baseload units in the year 2030, renewables and without renewables, variable renewables, I mean. And we can see in the top, the lower graph, when we have more VR in the system, even the core baseload units are expected to provide slightly more flexible operation and slightly lower minimum operational levels, and their frequency increases. Therefore, we identify the minimal stable operational level as one of the most important flexibility attribute of the coal-fired units, baseload units. Therefore, we recommend our future units to have their lower levels in the range of 40 to 50%. And next slide, please. Right. Moving to the storage hydro, we have a close to out of 1.4 gigawatt, around 1 gigawatt of storage hydro, and that is again act as a large natural battery in our system. And we are trying to see how we can exploit the characteristics to support the flexibility. We see that from our analysis, the hydro system's behavior that changes with the addition of renewables to support to balance the VR regeneration in the time to come. One challenge we have is that the multi-purpose use of these hydro systems, because there are other water users that restrict the fullest utilization of these hydro systems. The next slide, please. Right. Moving to another final flexibility time frame, we know that in the short-term concerns, we have variability and uncertainty presence from the variable renewables, and their variability characteristics are much more has much more relevance to do with regulating type of reserves. And in our country now, we have set up an automatic generation control system that will be utilized more and more in the years to come. And next slide, please. And these regulating type of reserves are expected to increase there because of the VR integration, and we have assessed how much regulating reserves we need at the time to come, and what are the changes required for operating reserve policies in years to come. And also we have suggested that adopting a dynamic kind of operating reserve policies so that we can use these reserves as a much more optimum manner. And even going to another final level of detail, we have looked at how the ramping requirements vary from these net load requirements. We observe that from the current trends to the future year, 2030, the ramping requirement of the net demand increases significantly. This graph shows the statistical distribution of ramp rates that we could expect in a given year. We can see by 2030, the daytime, because of the solar PV generation, there are much more variability or ramping requirement is there. So therefore, fast ramping generating units will add more value to the system. That is something that we are very much concerned. The next slide, please. Right. One of the long-term measures, for flexibility is pumped hydro storage unit that we are planning to introduce, that we have potential sites for large-scale pump hydro storage units, and we see this as a very long-term promising solution to enable this clean energy transition. And we are planning on adjustable speed type hydro units, which allow a range of services such as flexible ramping, frequency regulation, and this will even reduce the renewable energy curtailment in the time to come. And we are the initiative underway for a 600 megawatt adjustable speed type pumped hydro unit. Next slide, please. And one other strategy that we are trying to we are using to minimize the flexibility requirement is that the geographical dispersion. And we have observed that with the distribution, with the geographical distribution of solar PV generation, we can achieve a remarkable reduction in the variability levels. We can see it can be reduced up to 50% in most cases. Therefore, there are many schemes now going on with the small scale distributed type of solar PV installations. And in addition to that, renewable energy controlling center as well as renewable energy forecasting system is also underway, considering this distributed nature of the wind and solar resources. If you click forward, right, one other area is the battery energy storage systems to provide very short-term flexibility. And energy storage, we identify that the power-centric applications such as frequency response and the ramp rate control are much more relevant to our system, given our system characteristics, being an isolated and small system. So there are plans to add about 50 to 100 megawatt battery energy storage systems within now and 2030, depending on the requirement, and the detailed studies are now going on. If you click forward, right, even if I'm moving into the final level, if you're looking at the short-term frequency stability, you can see that as the severe VR variations, there are increase in the primary reserve requirements are observed in some of the studies we are doing recently, and therefore the opportunities for battery storage systems to enhance this primary frequency response is also being investigated, as well as we recommend that all future conventional power plants to mandatorily provide the primary frequency response. That is another area that we are improving in terms of unlocking this flexibility. And this figure shows an important challenge for an isolated systems like Sri Lanka. This shows the instantaneous penetration level of wind and solar, again the non-synchronous generation, because when we have more and more non-synchronous generation, inverter-based generation in the system, challenge the system inertia and the dynamic stability and the system strength levels as well. Therefore, Mr. Soni also mentioned how difficult it is to manage a smaller system. Therefore, this is another area that we are working on. This slide shows a different dimension of flexibility. It is the transmission capacity, because we have to develop a network to enhance the transfer capacity of these renewable energy resources. And most of the resources are located in the outskirts of the country. Therefore, there are here plans to reach out to those resources and to tap those resources in this the right. In my last slide, I want to mention that as a country, now looking at a significant transition toward clean energy, we are much more concerned on some flexibility, and then we are trying our best to understand the flexibility issues and the avenues that are there to enhance the flexibility. And we have already taken initiatives to establish a renewable energy forecasting system and a renewable energy monitoring and controlling center, and also changes to operation policy, and trying to enhance the flexibility of the enable the flexibility through grid codes and PPAs and agreements. With all that, we think addressing these issues, the planning level is utmost important, because properly identifying these challenges, their types and scale, that really help us to prioritize these interventions and ultimately to facilitate the clean energy transition. And with that, I end my presentation, and thank you for the patience, and hope this experience shared from Sri Lanka spurred some thought and shared some useful information with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Randika. Very useful. Can I request if you could go on mute? Okay, thank you so much, Randika. Very, very interesting. And I guess we should have done one separate session for each of the country. There's so much of things to learn from the experiences and where each of the countries are in various in their transition to cleaner energy. So we are over the time by 15 minutes or so. There have been some questions which have been put in the chat box, and we had received earlier some questions from during the registration time from some of the people. So we would at least like to take one question each, try as much as possible, and there may be some questions which we cannot take. And in that case, we will try to see if we could cover it during when we circulate the proceeding. So maybe if I hope all the participants can stay back for 5 to 10 minutes more, we will just wrap it then. I will quickly go through some of the questions we have received, and then maybe we can, I'll pass it on to Pramod for the concluding part of it. So I wanted to pose one of the questions which we had earlier received was for Mr. Sooni, which I'll pose to Mr. Sooni, is how relevant can the Indian power market RE integration initiative be for the other countries in the region? Can they be adapted in other South Asian countries? Now, so that's a question which I'll pose it to you, sir.
Thank you, Manali. Actually, I'm completely mesmerized looking at the presentation by Mr. Banerjee, Randika, and all that. And you very rightly said that they all need one full session. What a wisdom lying there, the amount of work which they have done. Now this itself answers your question, that if we interact, there is so much to learn from each other. And the way the Indian market is evolving, there is no choice but to integrate the entire region. And we have seen the advantages which India has received by interconnecting all the states and all the regions. And this is something which the region must benefit. We are one of the largest growing region, and the diversity is huge. I always say that even our holiday diversity between Bangladesh and Bhutan itself will give us weekly diversity. So there is absolutely no doubt about it that we must benefit from each other's thing. And the way we are still evolving our market, this is the right time for each of the country to align, so that we are able to harmonize our grid code and reduce the overall reserves and reduce and increase the inertia. Otherwise, every country will be facing these problems and coming up with the solutions which may not be very economical for that particular, for a region as a whole. It will be much more advantageous. So I was just trying to getting tempted to answer to some of the queries which has come up. So, policymakers and the regulators can throw surprise to us. We were very comfortable with 20 gigawatt of solar with Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission, and one fine day it became 100 gigawatts. See, 5 times. So there is no room for complacency. That we are moving in that direction is certain, and suddenly the speed will pick up, and at that time we should not be found wanting, is something which I would say. And then Sri Lanka offshore wind, so quality offshore wind is there, and once we get connected, we can even harness that. So I mean, I would say that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity which we must avail. We can't afford to let it go. Renewable is an excuse for us to set right things which we could not do otherwise. That's how I will end. Thank you so much.
That's a great way to put it, sir. I mean, especially in the post-COVID scenario, this is the time that we need to rethink how we are transitioning and maybe pick up the pace. So thank you so much. We have also received a few more questions in the chat box. And one of them, I'll pass it on to Mr. Banerjee for responding. I'll just read out the question for you, Mr. Banerjee. It says, is there any technology of increasing flexibility ramping rate in case of thermal power plants by having a storage arrangement of high pressure steam that can act as buffer for storage of energy generated through the momentum of the boil? Would you want me to repeat it one more time, sir?
Yeah, I could not follow. Yes.
It's a long question. So the question is there a technology of increasing flexibility or ramping rate, the flexibility / ramping rate in case of thermal power plants by having some sort of storage arrangement of high pressure steam that can act as buffer for storage of energy generated through momentum of the boiling?
What I can gather from these questions that yes, the ramping can be complemented with some sort of technology like battery storage, not with the steam storage. Steam storage capacity may be there to some extent in boiler or in deaerator, but I don't think actively ramping. But of course, the battery storage can be gainfully utilized with respect to the ramping requirement or primary frequency response requirement.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that clarifies the doubt with the question which was posed. There's another question which is on the cost, which is what is the cost associated with frequent cold starts for the coal plant? Do we have any details around the cost? So I'll pass it on to Anuj and also to Mr. Banerjee to respond. So Anuj, do you have an answer to the question?
Yeah, Monali. So this we tried to identify the cost for the flexibility study that we did for NTPC as well as for Gujarat. In fact, the cold start, the cost for per event of cold start that we arrived at was close to 90 lakhs per megawatt per event. So I would suggest that it's a non-advisable, it's a no-go. That any generating utility should avoid that. We in fact also identified cost for cycling, for hot start and warm start. Cold start happens to be the most expensive form of flexible operation, and should be avoided at all costs. So it was close to 90 lakhs per megawatt for 200 megawatt unit, and for 500 megawatt unit it was close to 126 lakhs per event. So per event of cold start it was 126 lakhs per event for a 500 megawatt unit and 90 lakhs per event for a 200 megawatt unit.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Passing on to Mr. Banerjee, if you would like to add anything or something.
Yeah. Simply telling that costs, cold startup cost, if we take only the oil cost, that is coming around for a 500 megawatt units, it is 20-25 lakhs. But with respect to other costs, say for example, with a cold startup, there are life expectancy, that means life consumptions of equipments. If we consider that, and if the cold startup, we can consider the other costs like the coal costs for the startup and the chemical and other costs associated, all those taken together, it will come around say 1.27 crore or whatever value is arriving. But it is the basket of all taken together. Okay, so all type of costs.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much to both of you. And also, I'm afraid that we are really, almost going to go more around 25 minutes or so over the time. So in interest of time, I will say that what we'll try to do is to put these questions, responses to these questions and pass make it a part of the package which we will be circulating. So the key takeaways from the speakers' speech presentations will be circulated along with these responses to the questions. So I'll pass it on to Pramod to do the concluding pieces of it. But before I do, I'd like to thank Sunisa, Mr. Banerjee, Randika, as well as Mr. Alam for sharing your experiences. And we hope to see you in the next series, all the participants as well as the speakers. So over to you, Pramod.
Yeah, thank you, Manali. I'll do a very quick summary of the already condensed session, the key points that were presented by the speakers today. Well, listening to Suni sir, as always, is a music to the ears. He explained the concept of inflexibility in simple terms. He also mentioned that while many solutions are available, sequencing and phasing of the solutions is the key. And he stated that grid interconnection and expansion and coal flexibilization are the least regret solutions for the flexibility. This is something which was also echoed by our speaker from Sri Lanka and from Bangladesh. Anuj shared the 4 stages that were followed in the pilot process for design, implementation, and scale up of coal flexibility projects. In the 4 stages that he presented, regulatory framework and fleet level strategies were formulated from the pilot design stage itself. I think that is something worth mentioning because it was different from a conventional approach where we first do the technical piloting and then we think about the scale-up strategies. Anuj also shared an interesting insight that flexible operation of coal plants can start from the operation practices itself. And the example that he mentioned that under the pilot, coal plants were able to achieve 40% technical minimum without any retrofits, I think speaks for itself. Mr. Banerjee highlighted NTPC's action on coal flexibility and the challenges that the plant operators face at minimum loading. He also explained NTPC's heuristic approach of learning while doing. And while he also mentioned that the field tests were conducted with a good coal quality, and a consistent supply of good quality coal is not always guaranteed. Dr. Alam Mandal from Bangladesh, he highlighted the lack of data and lack of identified sites for renewable development that is prohibiting conducting an accurate grid integration studies. But he also echoed Suni's point that extension of grid network to the areas where renewable additions are expected will help in balancing. Mr. Randika from Sri Lanka, he presented a very good analysis of the different grid flexibility measures that CEB and Sri Lanka is analyzing. And he also mentioned that the flexibility of thermal power fleet in Sri Lanka can be reduced to 40 to 50%. This is something that they are also thinking. He also mentioned CEB's recommendation to adopt a dynamic operating reserve policy compared to the existing policy. So I'll just conclude with 2 more points that the pilots that have been implemented in the GTG-RISE program, I think that have helped clear a lot of questions around feasibility, around actual performance. And they've also provided a lot of evidence for replication. And as Anuj mentioned, one can, if the regulatory mechanisms and there's the regulatory support, then country can look for 80 to 100 gigawatt of potential coming from the coal plants itself. I would also like to add, and this is something Suni sir mentioned in the beginning, that many champions of renewable energy, they say that clean coal is an oxymoron and coal plants should be stopped. However, for a country like India and for the region, it's a practical reality that we need coal-based generation to facilitate a clean energy transition. Clean energy, clean coal and renewable, they will remain symbiotic. So I'm thankful to the speakers and the participants, USAID's leadership, and the two organizing team, GTG-RISE team and my own SAREH team, for organizing this program on a topic which is of global importance and regional relevance. So thank you, Manali, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Pramod, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you, Suni sir, once again for joining us and setting context. We hope to see you in the next series. And thank you to the other experts and speakers, Mr. Banerjee, Randika, and as well as Mr. Mondol, and my colleague Anuj from GTG-RISE. And thank you to all the organizers as well as the participants. We will be circulating the proceedings along with some of the key takeaways as mentioned already. We also hope to see you in the next series, which most likely we are looking at planning to do it in a month's time. So the next one may be sometime in March. So look forward to seeing you all. Please feel free to reach out to us. We will connect you to any of these speakers you would wish to get connected to, and share any information which we have on the work which USAID is working on. So thanks once again, and everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Manali.
Banerjee, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Manali. So
I think I'll just give 5 seconds and end.
5, just give 2-3 minutes. I
Yeah.
see people dropping off slowly. Okay. Okay. Randika, thank you once more for joining us at the last moment.
Thank you again for for the facilitating the event, and probably see you again sometime. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Up
I'm
to
stopping,
okay.
stopping the recording. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thanks.
Nivedita
Bye-bye.
as well, and everybody else.